Today, I want to talk to you about self-awareness in a crisis. Now, self-awareness in a crisis sounds like a luxury, like Prada in a pandemic, but its self-awareness is the key to surviving and thriving in a state of crisis. Now, when the zombie apocalypse happens, when the giant spider comes, everyone has the same reaction to run away. But while most people are running away from the scary thing, a much smaller number of people are running towards something with a plan. In movies, typically this is Tom Cruise. Tom is running to save the world and/or his family in the process. And how is it that Tom is able to have a plan while everyone else is an extra waiting to die? I believe the secret, the key, is self-awareness. Now, to think about self-awareness, we have to go one level deeper and think about self-interest, how it is we define what's important to us. Today, we tend to define self-interest according to the hockey stick graph. Self-interest is something that we want, and that we want to grow so precipitously that it's a line sloping up and to the right. But this emblem of self-interest, sort of the be-all, end-all of success as we see it today, is actually just a small slice of a much larger picture. Because the x-axis of this graph representing time goes from now as far into the future as you can imagine. And the y-axis of this graph measuring self-interest, it also extends. As our self-interest grows, so do our responsibilities. It goes from me to us. The difference between being single and having a family, or being a solo entrepreneur and having employees, is enormous. So we can actually see four distinct dimensions of self-interest. There's now me. This is the space where hockey stick graphs live, what I want and need right now, how we see self-interest today. But there's also a future me, the older, wiser version of ourselves, who we hope to become, and who we do or do not become based on our choices every day. There's now us, our friends, our family, our coworkers, the people that we're responsible for and have an emotional relationship with. And finally, there's future us, those same group of people that we care about just 20 years from now. Every decision we make leaves a footprint in all four of these spaces. It shapes our future me, it affects our us, it affects the next generation. And yet today we're blind to everything other than now me. The first time I drew this chart, this simple 2x2 matrix, I thought, what is this a picture of? And I just wrote a very basic description next to it: beyond near-term orientation. This was a way to see beyond the near-term orientation. And as I looked at that, I realized it was an acronym for bento. And I thought about the Japanese bento box, the packed lunch with 4 compartments and a lid that lets you carry a variety of dishes, not too much of any one thing. And the bento honors a Japanese dieting philosophy called hara hachi bu, which says the goal of a meal is to be 80% full. That way you're still hungry for tomorrow. So bentoism is the same idea, but for our values and self-interest. A way to see the larger picture and not just maximize or overfill ourselves on now me. Now, this is not just a way of making sense of the world, it's an actual tool you can use to make decisions. It's a user interface. You can imagine a smoker using this bento to ask whether they should quit smoking. Now, to use your bento, it's very simple. You ask the question to each box individually and see what it has to say, because each will have its own distinct point of view. So for the smoker asking their bento whether they should quit smoking, their now us says, yes, you should quit. Your family hates it. The smoker's future us says, yes, you should quit. What if your kids smoke because of you? The smoker's future me says, yes, I want there to be a future me. You should quit. But the smoker's now me, it says to keep smoking. And for rational reasons based on its limited perspective, it's addicted to nicotine. Quitting is going to suck for now me. No one would choose such pain if they had the option. So our now me is rational, but based on a very limited perspective, and this is where we get stuck today. When we have a passive awareness of the world as we do now, where we only see now me as real and rational, and everything else is nebulous and not as real, something like continuing to smoke seems like a good decision. In fact, when you're trapped by this passive awareness, addiction looks rational. It keeps being good for now me, and now me is all there is. And on the flip side, sacrifice, giving up something now to get something more later, or giving up something as an individual so others can have more, seems irrational and impossible to justify. So this passive awareness really traps us in a number of ways, and what we need then is an active awareness. We need to develop a mindset that sees all four spaces, all dimensions of ourselves. We need to expand the perimeters of our self-interest so that we make decisions that are looking to fulfill all of our needs and desires rather than just our own near-term individualistic ones. Now, this is easier to do when you know your own values, and the bento is also an interface to provoke that. Inside each box, there's a very simple question that you answer. What does now me want to need? What does future me want to need? The first time I went through this process, I brainstormed a bunch of things. My now me wants to be safe. It wants financial security. It wants to be loved. My future me reminds me of key values in my life, like wanting to bring people together or not selling out my values for money. My now us reminded me of a small group of friends and how I take such pleasure in being hyper present with them, and thinking about future us, the world I want for my children, imagines a more just and fair world. Then I distilled these ideas down to something I could remember and something that was distinct to me. So what does my now me want? When is it at its best? When it's showing people the matrix, when it's connecting ideas and giving people a sense of how the world actually works. My future me is always whispering to me not to sell out and to create harmony, to bring people together. This is when I'm at my best. My now us is about deep time with a core group of friends, being hyper present, being super there for them. And my future us is not a world without a matrix, it's a world with a better matrix that works to our advantage. Now, I've made decisions using this framework nonstop over the past 3 years, and it significantly changed how I think about my life. The first time I used this to make a decision, I had been asked to give a talk for a company that I didn't like. Now, I've been asked to do these kinds of things many times over my career, and I've always said no. I've always said no and felt angry for being invited at the same time. It feels like a betrayal of my values to be asked by a company that I don't respect. But in this case, I got invited, and I thought I should ask my bento this question. And when I ask my bentos, now me, it says to show people the matrix. It says doing this talk, yeah, this sounds great. My bentos now us wants deep time. So an hour and a half to talk about ideas, it was on board. My bentos future us is about building a better matrix. And it said, you know, you're not supposed to just preach to the choir. This is absolutely where you should be. Let's do this. But my future me, which says don't sell out, said, no, don't do it. You're selling out. You're only doing this for the money. And I suddenly recognized that this voice that had been so angry, that had made me feel pissed off in the past for even being invited, that it was like a bouncer looking out for my values. My future me was this big dude making sure that nothing got in that I didn't want. It was protecting me. But by me having this active awareness to see the full spectrum of what was going on, I had the agency, the right to tap him on the shoulder and say, no, it's cool, come on in. So this way of seeing this full spectrum of the bento totally changed the decision I made, and did so with me still feeling good, knowing that I was doing something that was coherent in integrity with who I am. The same process can happen for companies too. The bento works very similarly for a company. It's now me is its profitability, its growth, its immediate priorities. Its future me is about the brand promise, their values, what it is that companies is saying to the customers you will get by using our product. The company's now us is about laying out its stakeholders and what its commitments are to them, to its investors, its employees, its community. And the future us of the company is its mission statement, its vision, where it wants the world to be in 10 years. And we can imagine Apple making its bento. It's now me is its mission statement, tools for the mind that advance humankind. Apple's future me is think different. It's always been a core promise of Apple's products. Apple's now us promise to customers is to be the just works technology, going all the way back to DOS versus Mac in the 80s. Mac was always the most user-friendly product. And Mac's future us goal is tools for the mind that advance humankind and that grow Apple. Its own self-interest is baked into here. Now, what's fascinating is that for most companies, their now me and future us goals are the same. It's growth. And so how companies succeed is how well they do at telling a future me story, telling a promise that people care about and that now us promise to customers and living up to it. So for Apple, we can think of the AirPods as an example of a great product according to their bento. It fulfills their now me needs. It's a think different product with no wires. It satisfies the just works requirement that customers are looking for, because when you put the AirPods in, they just play. When you take them out, they stop. It meets the expectations of what an Apple product should be. If you compare that instead with the touch bar, the touch screen thing for the laptops they tried introducing, yes, it thinks different, but it doesn't offer enough utility. It doesn't just work. It ultimately fails as being a product that is coherent with who Apple is. So seeing the full spectrum of the bento, seeing all dimensions, is about making your best impact, about seeing all the best paths to meet the expectations have for you, the expectations that people have for you, and for you ultimately to become your fullest potential of yourself. Now, I'm not saying that Tom Cruise is using the bento exactly in War of the Worlds and all these kinds of movies, but it is this kind of awareness that allows you to make choices like that, even in moments of emergency. It's in these moments especially when we need that to fall back on. Now, the bento gives us a lot of information about how to behave. In my book, This Could Be Our Future, where I introduce the concept of bentoism, I talk about how in each dimension of the bento, there are rightful values that guide our behavior. When we're making decisions involving the us, each other, we tend to lean on values like fairness or tradition to dictate the right and wrong ways to behave. Our future me is supported by things like a stick-to-itiveness or grit, or purpose or mastery, something that you have to earn over the long term. And for most of the 20th century, our society supported all areas of the bento with institutions. Most of the dominant institutions of the Western world have been in support of different dimensions of our self-interest. Now me institutions are things like the military or police that are keeping us safe and secure, or the focus on economic opportunity. Now us institutions are churches, unions, social groups, things that bring people together. Future us institutions is education, science, things that are building the knowledge that will shape the future. And future me institutions are pensions, workplace loyalty, things that allow people to have a sense of what the future will hold for them. But the challenge of the last 30 years is that all areas of the bento other than now me have been in decline. We have defunded, we have lost money, we have de-emphasized these other areas of the bento in pursuit of security and funding the war on terror and a surveillance state, and focusing on economic maximization with stock buybacks rather than building long-term businesses or making deeper investments in R&D. We've been trapped by this passive awareness, and it's limited our world. And we can see to what degree this has changed us. This isn't just a narrative. We can see it in data. There's a study that's been done by UCLA every year since the 1960s that asks incoming college freshmen about their goals in life. And one of these questions lists like 15 different life goals and asks them to rate these goals from either being essential or not essential. And one of these goals has to do with money, with being well off financially, being rich. And in 1970, the percentage of college freshmen who said being rich was essential or very important was 28%. That year, the number one most important life goal, according to college freshmen, was to, quote, develop a meaningful philosophy on life. 86% of college freshmen said that was important or essential. The last year this study came out in 2017, the percentage of college freshmen who said being rich was essential was 82%. The percentage of college freshmen who said having a meaningful philosophy on life was essential was less than half. If you chart out the answers over the years, by far the biggest change in our belief system has been the belief in wealth, the desire to become rich. The biggest decline has been a decline in creating a philosophy in life and having an awareness of where you are and where you stand in the world. We've allowed the search for philosophy, for meaning, for the full bento. We've allowed that to be replaced by a now me pursuit of money. And now we're in a place where our institutions are weak and our society is showing real strains. The answer is to expand how we see our self-interest. The answer is not just to maximize for now me, to pour everything into this one area and hope that it eventually solves everything. The answer is to go where the problems actually are, to build institutions and values where they need to be, where they have disappeared. Now, there's a simple process you can do on a weekly basis to start to build this muscle memory, because this ultimately begins on a personal level. And this is a process I do every Sunday, where I draw a blank bento like this one. I say, how should I use my energy in the next 7 days? And I listen to each of these voices, each of these dimensions of myself, and hear what they have to say. My now me will tell me to do work errands. Here's the things I have to get done, get the car fixed, things like that. But my now us will remind me of all the people that I care about and who it is I should be more in touch with, who I should reach out to. My future us imagines the kind of world that my child will live in, and how decisions I might today might have some ramifications, might model out a different world that he'll step into. If I'm not conscious of that now, when is that ever going to happen? And my future me is this wise old version of me, this Obi-Wan Kenobi, that's whispering words of wisdom and telling me what I need to be to end up like them. Now, when I do this every week, it takes just 10 minutes to go through this process, and I use it to make an actual to-do list, to where my to-do list will include reading a hard book, or reaching out to certain friends, or trying to approach my decisions with a different kind of energy. And this has become so powerful that it's something that I do with other people online. You can join us, bit.ly/weekly bento. And there's 50 or 60 of us every week who journal and go through exercises together to try to personify and visualize these different dimensions of ourselves, to step into fully who we can be. You can also follow along on bentoism.org, which will teach you the process of how to build your values and will provide you more ways to connect with the community. The importance of this idea and of the bento as a way of seeing our lives and the impact we have on the world, I believe that this is the transformational change that we should focus on. And I want to give you a sense of why I think that's so important. Imagine for a moment that this is you. This is your bento. I've slightly relabeled it. Now me is called you. Your future me, I've called your values. Now us, your relationships. And future us, you too. That's your kid. Now let's imagine you have a kid, and let's build their bento. And suddenly you can see the way that your values of you and your partner form a foundation that shapes who they become. And that the relationship between you and your partner is a propulsive force that pushes them into the world. It shapes them, just as they will do for their children, and just as our parents have done for us. And so there's a natural process that happens through time that I call a values helix, where through the course of time of new generations being born, previous ones dying, our values change. Certain values will grow, others will diminish. The way we go from 28% of college students believe being rich was essential to 80% in just 50 years is this gradual change, generation by generation. And in a world where we can only see now me, we limit our ability to shape the future, and instead will simply be shaped by mass media, by pop culture, by the worlds that surround us. But when we can see our bento, when we can act with that full awareness, that active awareness of our self-interest, we're shaping not just our lives and the lives of our families and friends and living up to our full potential as human beings, but we're shaping the lives of future generations and the world that is to come. Now, my book, This Could Be Our Future, a manifesto for a more generous world, goes deeper into all of this. And if you'd like to stay connected, you can find me at ystrickler.com, and you can start joining and participating in these workshops and experiences at bentoism.org. Thank you.
Yancey, thank you so much. That's so inspiring and so thought-provoking too. I really admire the initiative and the ambition. I think it's really laudable. Speaking as I am from London, I suppose what I wonder your framework is how do you think it maps to more communal societies? You know, if we take the United States as particularly an individualistic society, how do you think your framework would map out in say, Sweden or Norway?
Yeah, or even in Asia. Yeah, I mean, my belief is that all four dimensions of of our self-interest are real and are universal, but that based on our cultural context, we enter or default to a different space. So I, as an American, am probably culturally more prone to think from a now me perspective. But I think other cultures that are more communal or collective, someone might have more of a now us point of view that they feel more strongly about. There was a great line from a group called K-Hole. They had a famous report a few years ago about normcore, and they said that it used to be that people were born into communities and spent their lives struggling to find themselves as individuals. And today, people are born as individuals and spend their lives struggling to find their communities. Now, I think we have both of those situations are true based on the culture that you come from. And my belief is that the bento is a neutral map of what exists, and what in there is hard or easy for you, or what your culture encourages or discourages differs for us, but we're all operating in those same dimensions.
Tell me, the COVID pandemic has had such a huge impact on our lives, and I think on reassessing both the pace at which we live and the primacy, particularly, I think, of economic wealth or growth. Do you think that things will change coming out of COVID?
Yeah, I think they have changed. There's so many learnings from this. One, it's like when COVID happened, it seemed like, the world will never be the same. All it took was 2 months for this to feel normal. Now it's like it's become so normalized. COVID has gone from the story to the setting, as I saw someone write. So yes, it has changed us, and it might be that the change is happening first on an individual level for people, because I think like the success in the pre-COVID world was about being multidimensional as a person. It was about having a professional self, a work self, a secret self, an animal self, an exercise self, all these different dimensions, all these compartments. And then we used travel and space as a way to separate them, as a way to hold these various contradictions simultaneously. But now we're trapped inside with everything. So I really have experienced firsthand just a tremendous search for meaning among people post-COVID, because I think that pause provoked just enough time for us all to look inside. And I don't know that there's anyone that truly wants to return to the world before COVID. The system change will be slower, and it always is. It always is. But we are a world that has been remade by this experience. There's generations now that will be forever shaped by what has just happened and what is still happening. And we can also see, like here in the United States, how the world stopping, this chasm that opened up in a post-COVID world, has allowed a new civil rights movement to like take the stage in a way that I think attention might have been too competitive in another universe for people to be able to fully recognize the injustice that's been happening for too long. So I think that there is what all opens up on the other side of this. It's hard to predict, but one thing that's definitely true is that our dashboards have expanded. If we imagine the world before COVID, stock markets were the main dashboard used to judge the health of society. And now that is sitting alongside, COVID dashboards and alongside unemployment dashboards. And, if we start getting real, that'll sit alongside, CO2 pollution dashboards as well. So I think that the metrics we're using to guide and determine success are evolving. And a lot of my book is focused on that idea that expanding how we define value and expanding how we define self-interest is a must for us to address the crises, the multiple layers of crises we face today. It's exactly that kind of expansive view that's going to have to start happening.
I know that we're running out of time, but I'm struck, and I suppose by the amazing Black Lives Matter protests, and thinking about the work of, theorists like Sophia Noble, who spoke for us yesterday, who actually believe that whatever tweaks we make to the system, the problem is with the system. Do you think that, capitalism can be remodeled?
Yes. Because it is all the time. The current flavor of fundamentalist capitalism that we have now is about 50 years old. Like that had to be reinvented by Friedman and others. It's absolutely happening. I mean, the voices stepping up right now. I mean, four of my absolute favorites: Mariana Mazzucato, Carlotta Perez, Elizabeth Anderson, Kate Raworth. All four extremely powerful voices that are making the case for new paradigms to think about growth, to think about what success is. And the time has come for that. And in addition, technology and data is going to make the creation of metrics that are just as meaningful and universal as financial value possible for the first time. In the book, I write about Adele using an algorithm that would measure a fan's loyalty to her as an artist as a way to distribute concert tickets without having scalping in the market take control of it. And here she created a transaction where she was satisfying a financial requirement that she not lose money on the show, but she was optimizing for a now us value of loyalty with her fans and using an algorithm to do it. And I think those kinds of transactions where we are meeting a financial minimum, but optimizing for a non-financial value on top of that, I believe that is increasingly going to be the kind of transaction that we're going to move into. And ultimately, I think we will call this something like post-capitalism, where it's not that the needs of financial growth disappear. It's just that they will be not as important. They are an invisible table stakes. There will be that abundance to where actually the most interesting problems will be, what are the values you can build on top of financial capital? And I believe that's the story of the next 30 years, and that the bento is a map for where to build. Because a lot of people are doing this work, but they're doing it in isolation, in silos. And the bento is a sense of like, there is a notion of future us value. We can perhaps create some, we can identify what genres of value exist there, what traits they share, how we help those things, how we hurt those things. And so I just think that human beings, we're always doing the best we can with what we know. The question is, what don't we know? And I believe this expansion of self-interest and the series of steps that come from that, that's like the deep linchpin change that just allows a lot of other things to happen.
Amazing. I love it. And I love the idea particularly of reinventing how we look also at the commons and our common good. And so thank you very much for being with us, Yancey. I feel that was entirely too short, and I would have loved to have chat for much, much longer, but really grateful for your time and
thank you so much.
Allowing in to be with us. To our lovely audience, we also grateful for your time and attention. Please do pick up a copy of Yancey's book. It's a fantastic read. And do stick around, because we have an extraordinary session about sacred data that Johnny Penn will be running very, very soon. Thank you very much.
Want access to more CogX videos? Subscribe now for free at cogx.co.